Very good. So, if you remember, we're picking up where we left off on The Pilgrim Continues His Way, which is part two of Way of a Pilgrim. And looking, of course, the book is teaches a lot from the Philokalia. And this last week, we were listening to one of the gurus, the Shkimnik, which I assume is Russian for teacher or something, or for priest or something along those lines. He was giving us points on prayer, and he's got 6 of them. And we went all the way up to number 6, but didn't do number 6. So I'm going to just repeat them real quick here. He said, pray and think what you will, saying that, if your mind is in prayer, and by prayer, he means both like verbal prayer, contemplative prayer, and japam, repeating the name, or the Jesus prayer in his case. And so he's saying that pray and think what you will, having the prayer, having the awareness of the beloved in the mind is all the protection you need for your thoughts, that your thoughts will not stray very far if you've got the thought of God looping in your mind constantly. So pray and think what you will. And then the second one is very much like that. Pray and do what you will. Because if your thoughts are purified, your actions are going to be purified. And if you've got the thought of God there in time, you're going to be seeing him everywhere. And so your actions won't be led astray either. Then he gives a beautiful one. That's really a very great comfort, I think, for most of us. It says, pray and do not labor much to conquer your passions by your own strength. Wonderful, wonderful, because there's a few reasons around this. I mean, one, pray and don't labor too much to conquer your passions by your own strength. One, because you can't do it by your own strength. Of course it depends on your samskaras, but I mean, most of us, those passions within drive us insane. They just nag and nag and nag and nag. And he's saying that if you're praying all the time, the mind is purifying itself. And if you just keep your mind on the prayer and on the beloved, that those passions will be conquered by prayer, will be conquered by this constant pressure of the presence of the name. Like when Ramakrishna was in a haunted house, the ghosts would come and complain to him, go away, you're too pure, you're causing us a great deal of pain. And so if you fill your mind and body with the thought of the beloved, the divine, those unhelpful things will be uncomfortable, will want to run away, will disappear of their own accord. And this is also one of the interesting tricks. You see, when you're trying to do it on your own, where is your mind? It's on your passions, right? If you're fighting your passions, your mind's on your passions. And so if you fight them by prayer, let prayer take care of it, your mind is in prayer. And so you've got an extra level of help, of refuge for yourself. So it's a great idea. Just put your mind on prayer and don't worry about the fighting anything. Just keep your mind enraptured in the presence. 4, pray and fear nothing. This is the ultimate result of your practice anyway, that you're fearless because you know there is no other. The birth of fear is the idea of other. So with the formation of ego came fear, primordial. One of the first and most fundamental of your feelings inside is fear. And that fear runs so deep, most of us have just stopped thinking about it. We just don't even have it in our consciousness anymore. The mind just sort of has placed it on a shelf and put it over with the white noise so it can't hear it. But, I had a funny experience one time. It was a spiritual experience, but I had just moved into the old temple. I hadn't even become a monk yet. I had just moved into the old temple in San Francisco to try it out. And Swami had me live there for my first 7 months. And so I was in that temple, and one night, this is going to be one of those stories. You can do whatever you want with it. I don't think I've told it before, but I woke up in the middle of the night and I was laying in my bed and I was doing my mantra. And in those days I was doing my mantra a lot because I was so excited. I mean, I was just fresh back from India and had just had that experience with Moksha Prana, and it was just meditating all the time because I thought any second I'm going to be realizing God. I was totally fired up by it. So I woke up in the middle of the night and I was in that kind of half sleep, half awake state, and the name was going in my mind, and it was just really the little bit of bliss that I get from that or got from that at the time was really magnified. I was feeling wonderful. And then I thought that I felt the feeling was like I felt my soul slip, like somebody had pulled a sword just slightly out of its hilt, just like up a few inches. And I felt distinctly that my soul kind of slip up a little bit. And I was, whoa, 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 whoa. What was that? And I had this distinct feeling that I could leave my body if I wanted to, right? And so I sat there and I really got into my meditation for a moment, and I said, okay, let's see if I'm just dreaming this, or if I'm really feeling this. And so I gave permission to myself for it to happen, right? Well, I felt it start to slip again, unmistakably. And I can tell you, out of nowhere, out of the depths of myself, came this radical fear of not being able to get back in if it came out, that I would die. And I that fear was so powerful, man. I just slammed right back in, woke up completely, and just laid there with my heart beating. And I realized, more than the fun of the soul possibly being able to leave the body, at no point did it actually leave my body. I just had a very distinct sensation that I could. But the thing that I think Mother showed me more than that was that fear is what ran my life, and that I was unaware of that. I never had known the primordial fear of death that I carried around with me all the time. It was quite extraordinary. And so here he says, pray and fear nothing. You can let go of that fear because the sense of other diminishes. It becomes a world of you who is separate in your ego sense from the beloved, but it's just you and the beloved. That's all of existence. And so you're in the company of your lover. What is there to fear? There is no other. Your lover is the other. And so pray and be fearless. And for that to happen, it means pray and let go also. Pray for something. And when the mind brings it up again, says, oh, we've already given that to Mother. She's taking care of it already, to God. We don't have to do that. And you can pray it again if you want to. I know some people like that, and so you can, certainly. But the need's not there. You've offered it to Mother. Leave it at Mother's feet and go about your business. Leave it at Mother's feet and be fearless. Go forward. And then he says, number 5, pray somehow or other, only pray always and be disturbed by nothing. Incorporate everything into that prayer. Don't think that there are things that can disturb you or pull you out of prayer. Incorporate them into the prayer with you. I remember we had this young man join the monastery in San Francisco one time. Oh my God, I never saw a more restless person in my life. He would come in there in the shrine. He'd sit on the floor right next to me. We would wear chutters, those shawls, prayer shawls around us while we were praying. And he would just be there stretching and rearranging his legs and shifting and moving and just going all over the place. And I was sitting there, a brahmachari now at that point, like 4 years, I think. And I was sitting there and I was just rolling my eyes inside, and I was just complaining to Mother. I was like, what? Come on, this is my meditation time. Because I had always been alone in there, so I hadn't really had anybody disturb me like that. And I really started getting this attitude. And then, again, in my own way, my fun little way, I imagine that Mother's voice telling me, she scolded me again. She's often scolded me, by the way. Take comfort in that, I guess. But she told me, she said, what? Do you think you're the only one I invited here for prayer? I invited him here as well. The two of you together, I consider you one. You're my boys. And I felt so ashamed that I had drawn that line and had excluded him because he was disturbing my prayer. He was disturbing my practice. rather than knowing the truth of it, that I'm in that room fully, oh my God, utterly by grace, that it was by invitation that my mama brought me in there. And here this young man had the exact same invitation. And I, was having thoughts of exclusion. And so I went, after I had that, after mother finished, give me a good word or two, I opened up and I included him in my space, in my mental space. I kind of put my awareness around him, and it was wonderful. It was just wonderful. At that point, all of his playing around reminded me of a puppy. So it became a positive thing, and it became a bonding time for the two of us in the shrine together. And see, so prayer has that kind of power. So if you're praying and somebody's being noisy, or some cars honking, or some fire alarms going, well, not fire alarm, but some burglar alarms going off in a car somewhere, instead of feeling resistance for it, instead of getting put out by it, incorporate it. Just invite it into your prayer space. Share yourself with it and sit there and pray with all of those things to the Divine Mother. So that's what he's saying here. Pray somehow or other, only pray always and be disturbed by nothing. So if anything is disturbing you, just invite it in. Just bring it in there with you in a sense of sisterhood or brotherhood, and be together with it and pray together with it. And it's a very powerful practice. And I think it's so powerful because it's really the way we feel. It's really what we are. We are one with that. And when you recognize that in prayer and then act on it, I think it's doubly powerful in your awareness. It really opens the heart. Wonderful thing. And then number 6, the new one. It is to be noted finally that if the time of your vigilance in prayer is prolonged, then naturally no time will be left, not only for doing sinful actions, but even for thinking of them. Yeah, if you don't give any space in your mind between your mantra for wrong thinking to come in, this is after you've been doing it for a while and you've just got that mantra going in the back of the mind all the time, then you're busy. The printer's got a file in it already. It's printing. Anything else that comes can't get in the queue. It has to wait. So this vigilance in prayer, this is the reason that we pray without ceasing. That's the original investigation of our pilgrim, was to find out, what does it mean when God told us in the scriptures to pray without ceasing? Well, it means that. It means that. Initially, it means repeating your mantra until you're repeating it all the time. I think the more mature version of what it means is that ultimately you remember that every action and thought that you have is a prayer, that everything happens in front of the divine, in the presence of the divine, and that all of our effort to be aware of that presence is really just that, just to be aware of what has always been. And when you come to that point and you see your action as prayer, you see your words as prayer all the time, it brings a profundity to the experience. When you're talking to your friend and you know that it's prayer on your part, that you're talking to the beloved in their eyes. When you're talking to the cashier at the grocery store. I use that one all the time because that one's the most fun. You have just a few minutes that you're in line with them. Before you get to the cashier, you're kind of looking in their eyes, trying to see some light, trying to see Takor back there behind it all. And then you get up there, and when you greet them as Takor or Ma. And it immediately puts such a sweetness in your own voice, and it conveys a real intimacy to the person. And I've never had a cashier that didn't respond in a favorable way. Like just crack open that smile or that heart. And just, you don't have to talk to them any more than that. You just greeted Takor, you said it in the nicest way. You can carry on if you want to, but make everything a prayer. Be aware of the fact that that's what life is. Life is your prayer. It's your story of love that you're acting out for God. Now, do you see what profound thoughts are focused in the wise saying, love and do what you will, pray and do what you will? How comforting and consoling is all of this for the sinner overwhelmed by his weaknesses, groaning under the burden of warring passions. Exactly. You see, this is the meaning of refuge. This is the meaning of refuge, that even in our condition, we take refuge. And especially what's interesting is you can't take refuge until you've lost the war. You know, you don't surrender when you still think you've got some fight or some chance. You surrender when you know it's it's over. You've got no option. You're running with that white flag, looking for some refuge, looking for a place to hide, somewhere that's safe to go. And so this is how we approach God. We don't approach God as a hero. Look what I've done. How great I am. Now I'm spiritual because I worked so darn hard. No, it's like the purer we become inside, the more aware of our infractions and the depth of our infractions we are. And it's a hard burden to carry. Oh, God. Yeah, everybody knows that. It's hard to carry the burdens of your imperfections, of your mistakes, of your failures. But this is how we approach the Lord. That's the contrite heart, the heart that's like, God, I'm here, not because I'm pure enough to be here, not because I'm winning and doing great things for you and need to be here. I'm here because I've got nowhere else to go, and I need refuge. I can't do this. My samskaras are too big. My will is too weak. I'm too distracted. But I've dragged myself here because I have nowhere else to go. You are my refuge. In that time, in that space, God can move. God can touch you deeply and radically change your inner world. Prayer. There you have the whole of what is given to us as the universal means of salvation and of growth of the soul into perfection. Just that constant communion with the prayer, with the beloved. But when prayer is named, a condition is added. Pray without ceasing is the command of God's word. Consequently, prayer shows its most effective power and fruit when it is offered often, ceaselessly, for frequency of prayer undoubtedly belongs to our will, just as purity, zeal, and perfection in prayer are the gifts of grace. This is why it's very, very important and really one of the most beautiful privileges we have. I was going to share that. I really flipped my world over the other day. I woke up in the middle of the night and I couldn't go back to sleep. And I kept feeling like, I need to pray. I should pray. I should do my mantra. I should get up and do some meditation, because I was just laying there wasting time. Couldn't go back to sleep. And I just felt this resistance. And, suddenly the thought occurs in my mind. I was going to blame it on God again, but I'm getting nervous that everybody's going to think that I'm that I'm actually sitting here conversing with God. But I was sitting there and kind of just struggling because I wanted to just lay there and be lazy. And instead of, and then this switch happened in my mind. Instead of saying, I should be praying, I heard Mother say, no, I'm allowing you to pray right now. And that changed everything. I mean, my whole soul wanted to pray at that point when I realized it's a privilege, that it was a gift to the Mother, a grace, that I am allowed to speak my mantra. I'm allowed to do my practice. And so I've been using that the last few days. And I tell you, it has really, really changed. The last 2 days, I've done a lot more prayer based on that. Because before when I would say I should, I would feel my ego, my will self push against it. Like, I don't want to right now. But when I changed the words and said, hey, you're allowed to pray right now, that changed it. I wasn't being asked to do it. I wasn't being forced to do it. It wasn't a requirement of duty. And it just suddenly became so much more easy and so much more pleasant. And so think about that for yourself. See if it works for you. Instead of thinking, I should do my prayers, say, Mother's allowing me to pray. And then you just go and do. So then, and that comes from this idea that he just says here, that prayer, the frequency of prayer, the longing for prayer is a gift of grace. that our purity is a gift of grace, our zeal and our perfection in prayer are all gifts of grace. What does that mean? That means that you've realized that you're allowed, that you've been given a dispensation. You're allowed to draw near to God. You're allowed to come into the embrace of the beloved. And that is the grace. And what causes the changes in you is how you feel in the presence of that grace when you realize that the arms have been opened and you're allowed to draw close to the divine, that it's not a should, it's not a have to, it's not a must, a duty, but that it's a privilege. When you come to know that, your heart opens and you come from where you should have always been coming from. You're allowed to be authentic because finally inside your soul is singing a song in response to the song it's hearing from God. And that is how we change. That's how we transform. Not by our will, not by our efforts, not by our discipline and becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. All of our hope lies in grace, in understanding love with no condition, understanding it at the deepest level, so that fear drops away, even our primordial fears, so that insecurity drops away, so that our fear about our future drops away, so that confidence in our relationship with the divine comes from how great God is at relating to us and not how great we are in the relationship. It's a tough walk because we are in a marriage with a perfect lover. That's hard to tolerate. That means every problem in your relationship with God is your fault, bozo. And that gets hard to carry if you're trying to match God. If you're trying to do it on your own strength, it's going to be a tough haul for you because every mistake is going to be yours. And so do it with grace, do it with surrender, do it in refuge with the beloved, and know that it's yours simply because Mother is in the mood to love you. Mother just has a heart to care. And let your spiritual life be a response to that knowing, to that feeling. That's how it works. That's how you become undefeatable. That's how you become perfected in prayer. That's how you become pure. And so we will pray as often as we can. We will consecrate our whole life to prayer, even if it be subject to distractions to begin with. Now I'm going to read that again. This time, if you feel inclined, repeat it in your mind. Let's take this vow together. And so we will pray as often as we can. We will consecrate our whole life to prayer, even if it be subject to distractions to begin with. Frequent practice of it will teach us attentiveness. Quantity will certainly lead on to quality. If you want to learn to do anything, whatever well, you must do it as often as possible. It's a weird thing. If you want to learn to do anything, whatever well, you must do it as often as possible, said the experienced spiritual writer. Right? So this is our dedication to prayer, to just spending time with that which is the love we have for everything, to spend time with that which is the beauty we see in everything, just to get to know that which is what we want to know in all of our friends and all of our relationships, and to have that knowledge that we are directly touching love itself and we're being changed, we're being transformed. The professor: truly, prayer is a great matter, and ardent frequency of it is the key to open the treasury of its grace. But how often I find a conflict in myself between ardor and sloth. How glad I should be to find the way to gain the victory and to convince myself and arouse myself to continuous application of prayer. Yeah, see, he's struggling just like all of us have. It's that when it's time for prayer, your mind is like, okay, let me just quickly go get a glass of water. Okay, well, I better stop in the bathroom too. Oh, I was going to move my shrine table over to that corner. Let me just do that real quick before I sit down. you know? And the mind just keeps you busy until the time for prayer is past. You're like, oh, I'm sorry, Mother. I wanted so much to sit and pray, but I was so busy just getting all that stuff down. I'll sit with you in the morning. Don't do it. Know that that's not true. you have purposefully forgone your prayer time, and that's normal and natural if your prayer is a duty. But because your prayer is a love letter, it's quite different from that. I remember in high school, those first loves in your life. Just remember how much they consumed your mind. Those that crush that you had, just like, oh man, you never had to set a time aside to make their Valentine card. You'd start making their Valentine card somewhere in November, working on it and collecting things, saving up little knickknacks to put in the envelope with it. Right. So that's the spirit with which we approach the divine. we just we're writing love letters. We're looking for little trinkets, little things that express the way that we love God. So you pick that flower that you thought was so beautiful, or you take a picture of it and share that with Mother in the shrine. There's you something. All those thousands of pictures you've taken that you never look at, take them to the shrine. Mother will love to sit there and look at them with you. The Shkimnik, our guru again, is speaking. Many spiritual writers offer a number of ways based upon sound reasoning for stimulating diligence in prayer. Oh, cool. Okay, so here's some points for how to stimulate a desire for prayer. 1, they advise you to steep your mind in thoughts of the necessity, the excellence, and the fruitfulness of prayer for saving the soul, for rescuing your soul. Pay attention to how beautiful it is inside when you've got the name going with attention. Think of how beautiful that bliss feels, how sweet that silence, that tranquility feels in there. So just remember what the real gifts are in the presence of the beloved. 2, make yourself firmly convinced that God absolutely requires of us prayer and that his word everywhere commands it. All right. If that's helpful to you, that is a good one, to realize this is necessity. You will be stronger. You will grow faster. You will become as you most certainly are in your deepest innermost self through prayer. Right? So you're going to be able to see and enjoy this life in a real way through prayer. It's part of the secret when Vivekananda says that God did not create religion in order so that you can't enjoy the world, so that you have to renounce all the fun stuff. He says that's not what religion is about. He said religion is teaching you how to enjoy the world, but not get caught in it. Don't get trapped. That's what religion is. It's not trying to ruin your party, It's trying to teach you how to party and have a great time and leave the party a better person than you came to the party as. That's what he's teaching you. Number 3, always remember that if you are slothful and careless about prayer, you can make no progress in acts of devotion, nor in attaining peace and salvation, and therefore will inevitably suffer both punishment on earth and torment in the life to come. Oof, sometimes they get so heavy with this stuff. But you see, just the thing there, always remember, just think, who I'm given a choice here, to be lazy or to pray. And ask your soul, ask your inner self, definitely, what is it that you're going to feel better about 2 hours from now? In 2 hours, will you feel better that you rolled over and had half a sleep? Or in 2 hours, would you feel great because you overcame your laziness and actually had a little bit of good prayer? Which one's going to take you farther? So whenever you are confronted with those kinds of things, put yourself just a little bit in the future and ask yourself, tomorrow, the tomorrow me, Is it going to be happy that I did this, or is it going to be happier that I did that? You know, and lay that out and think about it, and do the one that makes you happier, makes you the man of tomorrow, the woman of tomorrow, happier than what you are today. You know, more strengthened in your determination and in your and a victory. You count it as a victory. Put a notch on your prayer belt. Number 4, enhearten your resolution by the example of the saints, who all attained holiness and salvation by the way of continuous prayer. There's no other way, you know. There's no way. It's just to approach God now in the full confidence of grace, in the full anticipation of a perfected love that you may not yet feel like you have, but you're going to trust that you do have it somewhere in there. You're just not aware of it. So you borrow on grace, you know, you borrow it. I used to imagine, you know, in the Old Testament, Joseph's father gives him this really nice coat of many colors. It's this famous thing. Dolly Parton has sung about it. There's been a Broadway play about it, the coat of many colors. And so when I was first doing my meditation practice, you know, I was quite aware of where I was really at, and that I needed a lot of help. And it was hard to sit in the shrine, kind of knowing that Mother could see through everything, could see exactly everything that I had done and was doing. And so I used to go in there, and I used to imagine, as I put my shawl on, as I put on my chadar, I would imagine that I was putting on my coat of many colors that Mother had given me, and it was the coat of grace, and that it would give me modesty in all the things that I wish Mother didn't have to see when she looked at me. And so it was a good practice in just the exercise of physically putting it on. I felt some sort of cozy forgiveness, you know, some sort of physical act that gave me access to the purity that Mother's love gives me, to the confidence that Mother's love gives me, and not my actions, not my successes or my failures. You know, circumventing your thinking like that, relying on grace and not on your goods and bads, circumvents your ego as well, because it's your ego that keeps your tally, your ego that keeps track of your history, holds on to your record of rights and wrongs. And so by learning to overcome that through grace, by grace, with grace, you become stronger in yourself, in your knowledge of self, right? And your life in yet another way becomes unconditioned. It doesn't become about whether you're good or bad, whether you're strong or weak, whether you're winning or losing. It comes purely about the fact that you are a child of the Mother. You know, I told that story in the monastery when I had the first year I was in the monastery. I made a pretty big mistake, which will die with me, but I made a pretty big mistake. And I was terrified that Swami was going to ask me to leave the monastery. And so when he came in from the office next door, I just, you know, I had been sitting in the shrine, kind of just really trying to figure out what it meant. And I went down to Swami. I told him, I have to talk to you, Maharaj. And he said, oh, very good. How about tomorrow morning after breakfast? I was like, no, Maharaj, I need to talk to you now. And so I went, we talked, and it was a very difficult talk. I confessed what I had done, and he asked me, he made me tell him the whole process 3 times in a row, you know, each time with just a few more details, a few more. And by the 3rd time, I was crying so hard I couldn't even breathe. And just suddenly he got very stern with me. He said, what is this crying? Stop crying. You are a child of the Mother. That is where your security and your strength lies. You are a child of the Mother. Now go, sit in the shrine and enjoy her grace. Your honesty has set you free, is what he told me. Well, your honesty has saved you, he said. And so I went up and sat in the shrine and just had a wonderful, blissful time, even though I felt like my condition was horrible, you know, even though I felt like I was more guilty than ever. Just with that command, that stern command was from Swami, you know, telling me, you're a child of the Mother. Stop crying now And he said it with that, like a holy man can say it. It sounds like a little kid yelling at you in a costume from me. But from Swami Prabhupada, man, that hit me like a mountain. It still hits me like a mountain, whenever I have doubts or whenever I feel dirty or alone or weak. I hear that voice, get up, go to the shrine and enjoy the grace. Although all these methods have their value and arise from genuine understanding, yet the pleasure-loving soul, which is sick with listlessness, even when it has accepted and used them, rarely sees the fruit of them, for this reason, that these medicines are bitter to its impaired sense of taste and too weak for its deeply injured nature. For what Christian is there who does not know that he ought to pray often and diligently, that God requires it of him, that we are punished for sloth in prayer, that all the saints have ardently and constantly prayed? Nevertheless, how rarely does all this knowledge show good result? Every observer of himself sees that he justifies but little and but rarely these promptings of reason and conscience, and through infrequent remembrance of them lives all the while in the same bad and slothful way. And so in their experience and godly wisdom, the Holy Fathers, knowing the weakness of will and the exaggerated love of pleasure in the heart of man, take the special line about it, and in this respect put jam in the powder and smear the edge of the medicine cup with honey. They show the easiest and most effective means of doing away with sloth and indifference in prayer, in the hope, with God's help, of attaining by prayer to perfection and the sweet expectation of love for God. Right? So those are the two things that we're going to get: the perfection and sweet expectation of the love of God. Right? So that's what comes through grace. Knowledge of that, acceptance of that, brings us into a deep prayer. And that deep prayer brings about our perfection and our love of God that we long for. The fulfillment, once that love of God is there, the love of anything else merges into that as you recognize that all the love that you've ever expressed toward objects was actually expressed for what those objects represented. And that's when all of your love that has been dispersed for your whole life suddenly snaps into a single stream of love for God. And realization is nigh at that point. It's very close. The beloved is very near. You'll feel his breath, her breath on your ear as you pray. She'll be so close. And prayer will be an embrace more than a conversation. They advise you to meditate as often as possible about the state of your soul and to read attentively what the fathers have written on the subject. Right? So that's just to constantly embalm yourself, as it were, in grace, and to fill your ideas and heart with scripture, with positive thinking, with messages of strength and victory, and all the promises that we get here and there through the scriptures from Mother. You've heard me say when we read them, I'll like, there's a promise. There's a promise, keep a mental note of it, or if you want to keep a notebook of all the promises that you read in the scriptures, it's a wonderful affirmation to have a list of those promises that you've picked up along the way. And remember, this is what Mother has promised. This is what Thakur has promised. This is what God has said. They give encouraging assurance that these enjoyable inward feelings may be readily and easily attained in prayer, and say how much they are to be desired. Heartfelt delight, a flood of inward warmth and light, ineffable enthusiasm, joy, lightness of heart, profound peace, and the very essence of blessedness and happy content are all the results of prayer in the heart. Woo! Look at that list. Heartfelt delight. So not just a surface light delight that's just sort of fluttering from a circumstance, A heartfelt delight, a delight with roots in your being, comes from this prayer. A sense of blessedness, escaping finally that idea that God is mad, or God's put out, or you're not good enough, or God is judging you, or God's so far away. All of that resolves into this essence of blessedness, this essence of blessedness that you have. A flood of inward warmth and light. I wish that was all the time, instead of just sometimes, but this flood of inward warmth and light is the fruit of prayer, one of the fruits of prayer. Ineffable enthusiasm, permanent enthusiasm. You're always game, always ready to go. I got some time to pray. Oh, I got some time to sit and be quiet, to contemplate. Always enthusiastic, always ready. Joy, just flat out joy of life. How rare is that to see joy in people's eyes today when there's no reason around? Mother has chosen you. She is allowing you to touch this possibility of being joy, being full of joy in a world that doesn't know it. Lightness of heart, freedom, lightness of heart, nothing burdening you in there. No wishing you'd done something different, no shame for, secrets here and there, no darkness, just lightness of heart with this enthusiasm, this joy, these warm inner feelings, and that established sense of blessedness, happy and content. You need nothing. You've come to know that you have all that you've ever looked for, that all the things, the names of God that were hidden in objects that you ran searching for before are now laying bare before you in the depths of the heart. You have, in fact, dived deep and collected the gems of the heart, the fruits of the Spirit, as it were: freedom, joy, love, grace, compassion. All these are the results of prayer in the heart. By steeping itself in such reflections as these, the weak, cold soul is kindled and strengthened. It is encouraged by the ardor for prayer, and is, as it were, enticed to put the practice of prayer to the test. As Saint Isaac the Syrian says, joy is an enticement to the soul. Joy, which is the outcome of hope blossoming in the heart, and meditation upon its hope, is the well-being of the heart. We hope that we can have the impossible through grace, which is at the depth of the impossible. So putting our hope in that, not on our performance, not on our doership. If we count on that, if we take consideration of that, the ego grows a little bit fatter every time, because you become responsible for all of the good and happy feelings that are happening in your prayers. And if you're responsible, ego will grow, that arrogance will grow. And soon you'll become one of those smug, judgmental church ladies, churchmen, the ones that kind of a little haughty and anyway, don't do it. Know that you are there by the love of God. You are there by the grace of the Mother, and not any other reason. And that reason alone is unchanging. That reason alone is always secure. The same writer says, continues, at the outset of this activity, and right to the end, there is presupposed some sort of method and hope for its completion. And this both arouses the mind to lay a foundation for the task, and from the vision of its goal, the mind borrows consolation during the labor of reaching it. This, wow, it's in writing here. I've been making it up and waiting for the day I would see this in writing. But this whole notion of borrowing on your grace, borrowing from this future realization, borrow it and believe it to be now. so that you don't get duped into thinking that something's coming in the future. This now is all you have. So here he says, lay a foundation for the task, and from the vision of its goal, the mind borrows consolation during the labor of reaching it. Right? So we borrow the consolation, we borrow the oneness with God that we know we will have when we're realized. We borrow all of the joy of that, all of the advantage of all of that, all the wonder of that. We borrow all of that and enjoy it now because it's inevitable. There is no possibility of it not coming to you. It has been promised and gifted to you as an heir to it, not as a beggar, as an heir, because that divine image within that God placed within you will bring you back to God. It cannot be any other way. And so borrow on that joy. If you've got a dry session where you're sitting there, the mind's a mess, everything's falling apart, you can't concentrate at all, you're feeling guilty and awful, at that point say, okay, I take out a loan here. I'm going to take out a loan on pure love, and I'm going to just sit here and meditate on pure love and assume it's reality even though I don't feel it. I'm going to take out a loan on my love of God even though I'm not feeling it, because I know that I have it. I know it's what composes me. It's what I am. So you borrow on your faith. You borrow on it and bring it into this moment and enjoy it, because time is irrelevant to God. In the same way, Saint Isiki, after describing the hindrance that sloth is to prayer and clearing away misconceptions about the renewal of ardor for it, finally says outright, if we are not ready to desire the silence of the heart for any other reason, then let it be for the delightful feeling of it in the soul and for the gladness that it brings. It follows from this that this Father gives the enjoyable feeling of gladness as an incitement to the assiduity in prayer. And in the same way, Macarius the Great teaches that our spiritual efforts, prayer, should be carried out with the purpose and in the hope of producing fruit, that is, enjoyment in our hearts. Clear instances of the potency of this method are to be seen in the very many passages of the Philokalia, which contains detailed descriptions of the delights of prayer. One who is struggling with the infirmity of sloth or dryness in prayer ought to read them over and over as often as possible, considering himself, however unworthy of these enjoyments, and ever reproaching himself for negligence in prayer. And I would say even one beyond that, that you just downright leave out your unworthiness. You just downright leave out your shame and guilt for not being able to pray, and just sit there and pray. Sit there and stew in this love of God, in this love that God has for you, and be amazed at how much love returns from you without you having to even worry about it, because you know that you are loved, because that you know you are forgiven, that you are free, ever pure, ever blissful, ever blessed.